Hello, everybody. Hello from sunny Paris, and welcome to this URBACT webinar on gender inclusive mobility in cities. Before we start our webinar, just to give you an introduction about who I am. So I'm Jenny Kutsamarku, as you can see in your screens, and I am amongst the 9 out of 10 women who have to walk faster many times when I'm doing things around the city. So, and also I wouldn't even tell you how many times I have to adapt my mobility behavior when it comes about me moving with my kids, my 2 little boys, with a stroller, but also with them just walking. So we have to do, as women, we have to do many reflections before we go out of the house. I also happen to work in URBACT for the last 15 years, which is an EU-funded program dedicated to the cooperation of European cities. So as a program, what we do is that we put cities together, city administrations together to work on common challenges on whatever topic. It can be on mobility, but it can be on gender, it can be on economic development, and so on. And with these cities, we try to help them to build their skills and their competencies in designing, in co-designing more sustainable and integrated local policies. And as part of our missions, we also try to disseminate the knowledge that comes from our networks and from our cities to a wider audience. Hence, this public webinar on mobility and gender. Let me now tell you why we're doing this webinar on gender inclusive mobility. First of all, because within URBACT, gender equality is one of our cross-cutting priorities. So I told you before that we finance city networks, so city administrations coming together to work and exchange amongst each other on different topics. But we also encourage these cities to take into consideration gender equality when they design local policies, but also aspects of the green transition and the digital transition. And throughout the years about gender equality, we have been working and we have been doing quite a lot of consultations with city administrations and citizens. And we came up with a report, which is called the Gender Equal Cities Report, and it's available on our website. And we will be talking about some examples of these reports already in this webinar. And we have also developed an online course, tutorials actually, video tutorials on gender responsive public procurement. So how can we include as city administrations, our public agencies, how can we include in our public procurements gender criteria, clauses for gender inclusion, but also award criteria when bidders take into consideration the gender dimension. And also for 2025, from this morning, we launched a new training course on gender equal cities, which is composed of 5 modules for URBACT cities. So this is not public, it's really dedicated to the 350 cities that are currently involved in URBACT networks. And we will be doing these training courses throughout the year. And of course, another reason of having this webinar on gender and mobility is that we have also at least two URBACT networks working on these topics of gender inclusion, and also some good practices that are available also on our websites, and that you can also be in contact with the city administrations that have put in place these good practices. And third, the most important reason why we have gender plus mobility is that currently mobility is a very hot topic for European cities. This comes out from 2 main consultations that recently took place. As URBACT, we had the consultation and mobility came out strongly, and also European Urban Initiative has also done a survey, and mobility again comes as a hot topic for European cities. And we do also have 6 URBACT networks. So this is around 60 cities working on mobility issues. So we wanted to combine all this together, put gender and mobility together, both challenges, and propose this webinar to you, which is a focused sessions that will raise hopefully your awareness on mobility challenges, but also solutions from a gender perspective. To do that, we just a few practicalities. This is a webinar mode, so the webinar is being recorded and it will be public once it's over. It will last 1 hour and a half, and the recording and the slides will be also available after the webinar. So we have your email, so we will send them over to you. So we will have also 2 moments for questions and answers. So hold your questions while we will be talking, and then we can pick up some of your questions. We will also be using Mentimeter for some exercises that we want to do with you. So you have the code here with you. So feel free already to scan it and keep it open until the end of the webinar. And also another very important thing is stay, if possible, until the end of the webinar, because we also have 3 questions for you to evaluate the webinar and also to know your interest and also your needs in having more webinars like this. And for today's webinar, this will be really a deep dive by our URBACT expert, PhD architect Iris Popescu. And Iris, I'm going to hand it over to you and talk to you in a while.
Thank you, Jenny. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me here. And thank you for joining us in this webinar. I will now share my screen. Actually, 2 screens, so we can also have the Mentimeter. No, it doesn't let me share 2 screens, but then I will change. Okay. Good. Okay, so a bit about myself. I'm Iris Popescu. My pronouns are she, her. And you will see throughout the presentation that I will give diverse visual cues related to what I'm presenting. And this is something that is related to accessibility. So in case there are people with visual disabilities who have joined us, they would be able to know what I am presenting on the slides. I will also describe myself. I am a white female of hopefully medium height. My hair is brown and it's long until my shoulders, and my eyes are dark brown. I smile a lot, and usually when I'm not smiling, something is very wrong. And these were the technical parts. Now, related to my professional experience and why I'm here, I'm an architect, and for the past 10 years, I've been specializing in inclusive design and accessibility. And what I do is that I design and facilitate empathy workshops in order to turn accessibility into a true priority in the design process. I also engage diverse communities in developing solutions for shaping inclusive public spaces. And basically, my work focuses on research and design in order to develop more inclusive urban environments. I also want to give a shout out now for our guests, who I want to thank them for their time and that they accepted this invitation. One of the most important parts of my job is to make space for human diversity and for space for people to be able to share their stories. I think this is a really important part in anything related to accessibility and inclusion. So our 3 guests today are Oana Pavel. Her pronouns are she, her. She's based in Bucharest and finds herself at the intersection of architecture, activism, and action research and education. Irina Coșescu, she, her. She's a legally blind woman from Romania, currently working and living as a product manager at Microsoft in Oslo, in Norway. And she's passionate about topics like diversity and inclusion. And Tony, they, them. They are a musician, trainer, and facilitator active in the realms of education, social justice, and eco-psychology. They grew up in Germany, but live in Sweden since 4 years and identify as non-binary. So thank you so much for joining us. You will soon be able to hear their stories. I will go through quickly the webinar's objectives. Today, we will be identifying and understanding biases on gender and the effect they have on mobility. We will be hopefully expanding the concept of accessibility and inclusion beyond the idea of permanent disability by considering how the built environment and public facilities create gender-based barriers. And the most fun part and interesting part, exploring real-life experiences of mobility challenges and exclusion in the built environment, public facilities, and everything related to the urban environment. The structure of the workshop starts with an empathy exercise. Then we will go through gender biases and the social model of disability. We will explore a real-life experience in Bucharest. Then we'll go to accessibility, mobility, and data biases, best practices, what's really, really useful. And we will have a conversation with the guest speakers, then the Q&A and the summary. First of all, I want to thank you all for joining. As I said also at the beginning, I was very impressed by the diversity of professional perspectives. I've made the kind of like a summary of and I grouped the occupations that you mentioned in the form that you have sent to us. Most of you work as project or program managers, like 35% of the people that have signed up. Then the next occupation is expert or consultant, like almost 20%, urban planning and architecture at 17%, and then research, student, and communication under 6% or lower. And these really diverse perspectives are actually very important, and they will enrich the first experience, which is actually inspired by a workshop that Tony held 1 year ago about burning biases. So now I will ask you, if you are comfortable, to close your eyes and listen. And if you're not comfortable, just listen if you don't want to close them. So close your eyes for 1 minute and take a deep breath. I invite you to relax and imagine you have been asked to attend a debate on developing public spaces in your area. It's the kind of event that sparks your curiosity. How will the city evolve? What changes are coming? But right now, your stomach reminds you that you are hungry. You indulge in your favorite meal, something you've been craving all week, and head to the nearby park to enjoy it. While enjoying this delicious meal, you notice a couple a few meters from you. They seem to be really in love and happy. For a minute, you catch yourself smiling. Their energy is contagious. You know nothing about them, but their love seems so natural. You finish the meal and check the time. It is late, and you are in a hurry, so you decide to use a car sharing service. The driver comes, and you get into the car. Fortunately, you arrive just in time as it begins. You hurry into the room, slipping into a seat as the mayor approaches the podium and welcomes everyone with a warm, well-practiced smile and talking about the importance of community development in the city. The anticipation in the room grows as the microphone is passed to the chief architect. This is what everyone came for. The architect presents a vision, ideas about parks, green spaces, and how people will interact with public spaces. You can hear the passion in the voice and the careful consideration behind every design option. But something feels a bit off. You glance around the room, packed with people. There's a sense that someone is missing. Someone or something. But it's not something you can put your finger on. You scan the room again, trying to identify who or what it could be. You may now slowly open your eyes And I will kindly ask you to join the Mentimeter at menti.com, MENTI.com, and you use there the code 381 12360. Or you can scan the QR code on the screen. I will keep it for a few seconds more so you would be able to scan. While you will see the questions, and I will also read the first question, please bear in mind that there are no right or wrong answers. You cannot see the Mentimeter, right? On the screen.
Not yet, Iris.
I need to switch between. But you can see the first question. The first question is, how did you imagine the couple? And here you can describe exactly how you imagined them, like gender, age, race, maybe, well, whichever details were relevant in your imagination. For now, we have two guys, a couple I know, young, a girl and a boy, smiling and warm. Another answer, happy and kissing. Young woman and a man, white. Male and female, young below 30, a boy and a girl. I pictured my own relationship. Young girl and a boy, male and female in their 30s, two white women, a boy and a girl. It was my age, around 30 and gay. Gray-haired, laughing on a beach. Young couple around their 20s, girl and boy. Male, female, young, carefree. I imagined a young heterosexual couple. Did not notice their gender. Young 20s, my partner and me, haha. White, blonde, young, male and female, beautiful young family. We have a lot of answers. You can see you will also receive the answers, so you can explore what everybody, they are anonymous, but you could see and read them and see if there are patterns of how we answered about this. Heterosexual couple, young white woman and man, young people wearing summer clothes. Thank you. I will also move to the next question, which is related. You answered already. How you imagine the mayor? Oh, somebody answered me. Male. A woman with brown hair who is a bit like someone I know. A man and sad face. Upper mid-aged woman. I imagined a white middle-aged man dressed with a blue suit. Mid-50s, experienced, very diplomatic. Another answer as a man, 40, 50 years old, standing on a podium, white man, white, wearing a suit, someone like Ursula von der Leyen. A man, tall and smiling. A woman, because of the warm smile. Tall, gray hair, middle age. A man in his 50s. Male. A lady in a sari in her 40s. A male in a suit. Okay, again, a lot of answers. But how did you imagine the architect? We are really curious. As I said, no right or wrong answers. We are not evaluating anything. A man, male, Iris, like Iris, female, man, a young girl in her 20s, very energetic, female 40s, professional, a woman in her 50s, a woman in her 30s, a white man, male, older white male, young woman, elegant around her 50s, young female, a bit artistic, a late 30s woman, super enthusiastic, a white man in his 40s, young around 30, a tall man, female, man. Place myself in that role, 50-year-old white male, a cool 35-year-old woman. Thank you so much for sharing your answers. And now I will also reveal why we did this exercise and went through these questions. As I said, no right or wrong answer, and we were not looking for this. We did this exercise because it simply highlights how our imagination is actually shaped by our experiences and the people we've encountered throughout our lives. Because biases are a natural part of our lives, and they actually serve as a comfort in the face of uncertainty. They are kind of like a way to short circuits and to help us deal with situations we are not completely familiar with, and it offers us a sense of control in a way. Biases can be like assumptions, attitudes, or beliefs, and as I said, they are shaped by our experiences. But the thing is that we are also building and developing our projects based on what we have experienced and on these biases. And sometimes it's challenging to create and to do work in urban development for people we do not know, because we cannot know everybody that lives in a city or in a rural environment. So basically, we are building from the images and the ideas formed through our resources and our imagination. And sometimes this can be limiting. That's why it's very important to try to identify and challenge these biases. These biases can be on diverse related to diverse categories, and the hierarchy of these categories is different depending on each of our experiences. They can be related to age, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, social class, ability, disability, profession, and so on. And thing with them, as I said, they are a natural part, so it's okay to have them. What's not okay is to not try to identify them and try to challenge them. Because in time, biases turn into discrimination, and discrimination that it is not addressed turns into systemic discrimination. And this starts to affect people's lives on all levels, from access to education, to having a job, to being able to be mobile throughout the city. It affects everything in their lives. So the first step in identifying biases, and the one which I consider is the most important, is actually trying to understand where they come from, which are the enablers. And in this case, I chose 4 relevant enablers to the topic of gender biases, which are history, language, and the concept of universality of man, and one really important one, which is related to absence. And these biases actually are very important because they help us and actually influence us in how we shape our cities, who we prioritize in planning, and whose needs sometimes remain invisible. When it comes to history, I've selected 3 examples which I think are really relevant. One is related to eras when women had restricted mobility and participation in public life. This one of really good information was from the 19th century from Caroline Criado Perez's book, Invisible Women, which is a really good analysis on data on different topics related to women and gender biases. It was actually in the 19th century in UK, young women from higher social class could actually have their reputation tarnished if they were present by themselves in public spaces. Then the concept of flaneur, which is a concept created by Baudelaire, and then it was used also in urban planning, which is related to the idea of a young, able-bodied man who can stroll without any care in the world through the city and experience everything. And this actually emphasizes the absence of the flaneuse, which would be the feminine of this experience, which doesn't exist in this concept. Then also planning centered around a male breadwinner commuting to work. This happened a lot in the US after the First World War, when data was actually gathered and the needs that were taken into consideration were related to this productive, able-bodied male that was the breadwinner of the house. Then another source of biases is related, and very important, is related to language. The first information is related to languages that have default masculine terms, like German, for instance, because in German you have nouns that are formed, their default form is masculine, and then when you want to make them feminine, you need to do a deviation from that male word. So the norm is the male noun, and then it makes women feel linguistically like another, or this would be the way the message it sends. But you also have languages like the Romanian one, which are strongly gendered languages, And these languages actually correlate with greater gender inequity. For instance, in Romanian, it's very difficult to address or to communicate about non-binary people because they, them are also gendered in our language. So what happens is if language ignores a group, you have the risk of exclusion from solutions because if you cannot talk about it, it doesn't exist. Or that's what it suggests. And then the strong concept of the idea that man and whiteness in general, or maleness, are seen as neutral, making the other identities seem niche or subjective. I came across this a lot in the field that I work in, architecture, where in many articles, and there are also essays and books about this, you will see that architect is the default term, and then you have the others, which are women architects, Black architects, queer architects, and so on. This gender data gap reinforces the idea that male perspectives are the default. And this is something that we are working on. And as I said, one of the most important enablers of gender biases is actually absence. When someone is not represented in data, they start to become framed as minor or irrelevant. And this goes to the most, let's say, the smallest gesture when it comes, for instance, to data collection, to offer a box to tick. For instance, when it comes to sex identification, you have female, male, intersex. I've made intersex gray and female and male black because you don't come across it very often. And then when it comes to gender identity, I've made female and male black because you can come across them very often. And then non-binary and transgender gray, but there's also an even broader spectrum when it comes to gender identity. And these people exist, and it can be extremely frustrating when you cannot find your box to tick. So which are the effects of all these biases that we come across and that we have to deal with? I want to start this conversation from the data that you gave us. It's related to the question of if you ever felt exclusion or challenged when it came to urban mobility. And 54.3% of you people, of the participants answered that they have felt excluded due to mobility barriers. So the effects of these biases can have been felt by more than half of the participants here. I also want to mention that almost 82% of the participants identify as female. And the most common reasons for exclusion are safety concerns, infrastructure barriers, limited transport option, and higher costs. And because these were the main obstacles that were signaled by the form, you will see that throughout the presentation, these 4 topics will be addressed in problems and common grounds of exclusion, but also in solutions. So this takes me a bit to where we are nowadays. I mean, the current state of affairs is kind of showing a decrease in interest in diversity and inclusion, but still until this year, inclusion, diversity, equity, diversity, and so on have been really hot topics, and I can almost say they became buzzwords and they've kind of lost some of their value. And even though they have been so trendy and trending in all of our projects and in strategies and presentations, you might think, that maybe discrimination based on gender, for instance, is lower, or discrimination in general created by the built environment and urban mobility, it's much lower than in the past. For instance, what I told you about restricted mobility, or how it was in the 20s, in the 20th century, where you had clear discrimination like white spaces, black spaces. But even though unfortunately, it hasn't gone away. It's still there. It's just turned more subtle. And when it comes to mobility systems, they are usually considered somewhat neutral, but unfortunately they are not. And they reflect existing social inequities. Various socio-demographic factors can increase barriers to safe, accessible, and affordable transport, or to making city movement more difficult for certain groups. And as I said, this discrimination and exclusion still exists, and unfortunately, it is painfully present for those who are facing it the most. And once you start to search for these stories of exclusion and search for diverse perspectives on the interaction with public spaces, it's like learning a new language and you start to see the messages of exclusion everywhere. This is why it is very important to have an intersectional lens and to look at topics to try to find where these exclusions overlap, because there are so many problems that sometimes, not sometimes, actually most of the times, there is this, it started to become like a competition between people who feel exclusion and the groups that are excluded, between whose problems are more important and need to be prioritized. And the thing is that we should be working together to try to see how we can solve, because there is a lot of common ground in exclusion, and we would be more powerful together than to try to see which problem is more important. And this intersectional lens and intersectionality means that exclusion is not based on a single factor, but it is shaped by multiple overlapping identities, for example, gender, race, disability. And the more factors of exclusion a person experiences, the greater their mobility challenges and the exclusion is. And I will try now to go through those 4 topics that I mentioned and to try to find common grounds in exclusion. I want to mention that the examples that I'm giving are not an exhaustive list. They are just a few examples and the starting point, because the list, we would need a webinar just to discuss common grounds of exclusion. It's not enough to discuss it in the first 15 minutes of this webinar. So I will start with my own personal story. On the image, which is related to public space safety, it's a photo of a small Ericsson screwdriver, which actually has a coin next to it to offer information about scale and how small is it. And I used to have one of these screwdrivers, and I carried it with me for 10 years while I was a student, because it gave me this false sense of control and security when it came to traveling, especially during winter time, when it got darker earlier. And it made me feel like I could be in control in case something happened. And I wanted to ask you again kindly if you would like to join Mentimeter again, to maybe share if you have any objects that give you this sense of control and security. So it's menti.com, and the code is 38112360. The question is, what objects did you use to gain a sense of control and security when it comes to urban mobility? One answer, no. Keys, mobile phone, pretend I'm on my phone, none. Keys, mobile phone, none. House keys, a phone to be able to call for help. My keys, haha, none. Tear gas balloon, none. Keys between my fingers, yeah, it's a classic. My mobile phone, keys in between fingers, none. Pepper spray, keys, cutter, pepper spray and keys, cutter. Hood, pepper spray or my keys, pick in my hand, light, headphones, bike, phone, keys in my hand, my mobile phone. I have GPS app with my family, keys and phone, calling, an anti-mosquito spray that doubles up as a weapon, act weird, mobile phone, a lot of mobile phones. I put my headphones, but don't listen to anything. Never, I was maybe not careful enough, being a woman, in parentheses. No headphones, I'm a white gay man, so nothing really, but I'll hide very flamboyant clothes or stuff. So less visibility. Keys in my hand. We have 74 answers, and people keep on answering about the objects that give them a sense of security to be able to go past the safety obstacles that the urban environment present. I will wait a few more seconds. Mobile, light, bike, paprika spray, never use headphones, feel safer on my bike. So 78 responses, about, some of them are with none, but most of them are with objects that people use to gain more safety, let's say, perception. Thank you again for answering and participating in this conversation. I wish we could have talked directly, but no, this is the infrastructure. So moving on from the personal stories, my story, your stories about the objects. I'm going to facts about public space safety to identify these common grounds of exclusion, starting, of course, because safety and women were the majority in the forum. Information about women in public spaces related to safety. A 2020 Plan International survey reported, this is in the UK, that 2/3 of girls had been sexually harassed in public spaces and 35% had been hassled while wearing school uniforms. This is from a platform I will discuss later, which is called Make Space for Girls, which is really, really useful. Fear of harassment is a substantial barrier for queer and trans mobilities. This is another study that I will discuss later from AUP, Queering Public Spaces. And also, when it comes to queer women and non-binary people, the participants raised the concept of double victimization as a basis for increased harassment in comparisons to other LGBTQIA participants. When it comes to infrastructure, the common grounds for exclusion, women, even when you intersect gender with disabilities, they face compound barriers, usually related to the accessibility of built environment, like lack of ramps, elevators, poorly designed pedestrian paths, no way to let's say, be able to understand the structure of the built environment. We will discuss this later as well. And when you also add caregiving obligations or responsibilities to gender and disability, the need for accessible facilities is actually higher, and you need adapted restrooms and easy to navigate spaces, because these actually become a decisive reason for you to be able to get out or no out of the house. Some people are completely isolated because they don't have public bathrooms. They are not able to move around the city because of the lack of these accessible facilities. And when it comes to cost and transport, because this is also a really important part and a hot topic in the forum, we have the pink tax, which is a concept related to higher costs of living or mobility for certain groups based on their possibility or tendency to use certain facilities. And one of the examples here is to avoid, or even impossibility when it comes to permanent disability, of walking or using public transport after dark, and instead rely on taxis or ride sharing, often facing higher charges, because this also happens in gender biases is also in apps, and usually they charge more people that identify as women in those apps, especially after a certain hour. Really interesting as well. And as I said, also impossibility, there are a lot of people with disabilities, like permanent disabilities, like locomotory or visual disabilities, who, because the built environment is not accessible, are forced to use car service systems, if they have the resources to do that, to be able to move around the city. And this also involves longer time for planning. Also have an example from a wheelchair user in Copenhagen from Bevika Foundation that needs 1 week before a new trip around the city, just to plan, to check the routes for accessibility issues, to see which train is the one that's accessible and at which time it comes, and so on. So, and this longer times means cost for the person that needs to spend more time. This is also for women available. It's true when you maybe take a longer route because the direct route is not safe or is not well lit. So when it comes to transport, how many people does it take to get a baby onto a bus? Now I will present a series of photos that will take us through this question. The first one is from Berlin, where the image shows somebody that seems to be a white male with a baby stroller. He is sitting on the car lane, which is between the tram that they want to go in and the sidewalk. Although the tram was supposed to be at the same height as the sidewalk because it is an accessible facility, they cannot use it directly because we have this car lane between them. So one person might be enough to put a baby on a bus, but then maybe two people. This is another example from Bucharest. Two women are trying to take a stroller out of the bus, or maybe three. Another baby exiting the tram, or maybe even 4 people, 5 if you also count the person who is giving indications on how to put the baby on the bus. So in conclusion, it takes a village or a city to put a baby on the bus, exactly like it takes to raise them. And with this introduction, I give the floor to Juana Pavel, architect, to share a bit about her experience. Hello, Juana, and thank you.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I don't know if I can turn my video on as well. No? Okay. Yeah, I will show you a very brief experience from I'm a new mom since almost a year now, and my life and my relationship to the city has changed fundamentally. And we go out every day, so this is like a very small glimpse of how our day-to-day life, pushing the stroller nearby the house and going to the park, maybe grocery shopping, is for me and my baby Dora. You can let it play. Thank you. Nearby our house is a small green space where you would intuitively want to go when you go out, but it's not accessible at all for the stroller. Also, Bucharest is well known for its very high number of cars that are prioritized in front of any other kind of user of the public space. Sidewalks many times lack completely, where you have a lot of parking in the residential areas. Even where you do have accessible or somewhat accessible sidewalks, there are right in front of this sidewalk, there's a parking space uh, drawn by the city hall. So this is the short glimpse how we leave the house to go to groceries, and then if maybe we can jump to 1 minute and 30.
Sorry, there was a
30
problem.
something. It's fine there. Yeah. Okay, then you have inaccessible sidewalks. A lot of inaccessible sidewalks nearby going from our home to the park. And I am trying to show you here also how maybe the baby's perspective feels, because I have a good stroller. I really did a lot of research when I chose it, especially because of the lack of accessibility in Bucharest and that it had to adapt a lot. But for my baby, I think it's very interesting to change the textures and speeds and the bumping that changes a lot. We are obliged to go a lot on the car lane because sidewalks are blocked by cars or sometimes by garbage that hasn't been taken out by the firm that does the sanitation. We have to give priority to the cars in many situations. And then another thing I have to do a lot. It is talked about the planning if you of the person in Copenhagen in a wheelchair. We have to plan a lot when we leave the house as well. I don't know. There are a lot of women here. Probably some of you are already moms. I have to confess, I have to plan as in late pregnancy how long I can stay out in relation to access to toilets nearby my house and in the park nearby. I cannot go to the toilet with my baby. There are some public toilets that are not dimensioned or equipped so that I can take Dora with me. You can skip a bit ahead with the video. Then I cannot leave her outside in the park and use the toilet, so I have to think and plan my routes that I can be home in time or maybe at a coffee shop or so on. Because I need to go to the toilet more often. Perks of pregnancy. Okay. And then when you go to the grocery shopping, maybe a bit ahead, There are some formally designed ramps and executed that you cannot really use. I have a lot of trouble with this one, and it's kind of a good one, a good ramp. When I turn the stroller, it can definitely not be used by a person who is in a wheelchair. Not independently and not with help, because you do not have enough room to turn the wheelchair 180 degrees. So, and then almost at the end it recently snowed a lot in Bucharest, like 2 weeks ago. We couldn't use the stroller at all. There was a lot of snow, and then when it started to melt, a lot of water. So I carried my baby everywhere, and she's now 10 kilograms. And we just had to turn around so many times because the sidewalks or the streets were not accessible. And here at the end, there's a ramp at the nearby store, right under the pile of snow. So this is day-to-day life in a residential neighborhood in Bucharest, which is not a pedestrian-friendly city whatsoever, even if you are the typical user and you have no disability, permanent or temporary.
Thank you so much for sharing. Jenny, if you want to take one question, if there are any questions now. If
Yeah,
not,
thank you very much, Oana. This was really interesting. I mean, I completely relate to everything that you just showed, and I'm sure there are many women or even dads that also relate to what you showed. I'm wondering whether there are any questions from our participants. There is the question and answer section, so you can put, let's take a few seconds for you to put any questions that you may have for Oana, for Iris, that what we have presented so far. And then we will take like 2 minutes to go through to pick some questions, and then we will move on with more examples about solutions.
yes, maybe just one question now and the others later.
Yes. All right. So there is also a message of solidarity, just to say, from a mom of three babies already. There is a question: do you have to use these sidewalks, I mean, officially or legally? And there is a question about if there are norms about building ramps.
There are, yeah, it's a law, but there are no professionals who are specialized in this to check if the norms are applied in accessibility, I mean, a built environment. And for the other question, Wana, if
I don't know if I have to use these sidewalks. I don't have to use them. I don't have any other alternative. There is no... Yeah, legally you do have sidewalks. Formally, they are conformed to be accessible. In the day-to-day life reality, it's what I presented you in the video.
Yes. And there is also a question about whether there are cities that are forerunners on the topic of gender and mobility. But perhaps let's keep this question, the answer for later on, as soon as we go through all the examples. Let me just see, I have also a couple of questions more. All right, so there is a very good question actually. Do you have ways to report illegally parked cars and get them towed away? Get them, yeah, if you can get them moved.
Yes, we do have the ways. Sometimes they are picked up, but for people who... First of all, there's a problem because there are way too many cars than the infrastructure for parking spaces can allow. And this contravenes with the property rights. There is no limit into how many cars can a family or an individual own. So there is not enough infrastructure, first of all, to allow good parking. Then the public transport in Bucharest is not yet as good as to encourage you to leave the car at home or at wherever, or to not buy cars. We will get to that, I think, at the end, maybe. And on the other hand, for some people who park illegally, it's cheaper to occasionally pay. This is from talks with police officers. They occasionally prefer to pay the fine than to actually have a subscription for a paid parking lot throughout the year. So it's a systemic problem for now. Thank you.
Sometimes they don't have the option where to park. I mean, they cannot pay anything because they park on the sidewalk. And another problem is that we have 6 districts and the main mayor, and each district has its own laws regarding car towing. So this is a very big problem. Some districts cannot do this. And thank you for the questions, and we will also reply the one. I have a good answer for the city, the example city.
Yes, just one moment, Iris. Just also about this question about the illegally parked cars. Just also there has been also a few years ago, at least in Thessaloniki, in my hometown. Some years ago, I remember there was a movement, a citizens movement, also that had printed stickers. And they would people who were blocked by cars would just put the stickers on the cars, and the stickers would say like, "I'm a donkey, I cannot move," something like that was insulting to the driver. So there is also this kind of movement, citizen rules, that are also interesting. And also, usually, in terms of who is responsible about removing these cars, is usually the municipality, the municipal police. In many cities, at least, they have also this responsibility of also going there and giving also fines to the drivers. All right.
On to AI and mobility, because
Yes, let's move on, and then I'll pick up some other questions for afterwards.
yeah, because we also need to do the conversation with the guests, which is very important. Okay, so AI and mobility. Tech has advanced very much, and we are starting to use AI a lot in urban planning, and we will use it more and more in urban planning and mobility. And the thing with AI is the fact that we did not solve the problem with our biases. AI has been trained with our biases. So there's a really big danger to actually enhance the already existing systemic discrimination. And I have some examples. For instance, AI learns from historical data, which means it reproduces existing inequalities in transport system. The example is related to AI-driven transport planning, which often prioritizes male commuting patterns, which are usually they're simple, like work-home routes, and ignoring trip chaining needs. This is something typical for women, for instance, who tend to put in a one day more trips than they need to do. They connect them together, which is called trip chaining. So the apps are ignoring the trip chaining needs. Then also algorithmic discrimination. There is a fear in LGBTQIA community that facial recognition used by authorities could actually intensify hostilities from law enforcement. And AI-powered navigation tools optimize routes based on traffic data, not social data. So they often push more congestion into marginalized areas that were historically excluded from urban planning. And I also have 3 images, which are generated by AI to showcase you a bit the biases that it inherits. This is from my AI that is already trained with what I gave it throughout the years, I don't know, 2-3 years. So when the first image on the left, I asked him to give me an example of a mobility expert, and it shows 2 screens, one horizontal and vertical, and the mobility expert seems to be male and white with gray dark hair. The center image is again a mobility expert, and it again gave me a male, white in suit. And the third image is when I asked ChatGPT to give me an image of an architect or urban planner. Again, white, male in suit. You can also try this, test it with other AI systems. So where are we with these things? I mean, what's going to happen and what can we do further? One thing that I'm always promoting is to try to start to see disabilities from the social perspectives, because in order to actually start to prioritize accessibility in all our projects, when it comes to urban mobility, urban development, and not see it as a special case as it is now, where we only have accessibility in mind in some cases for some people or for somebody when somebody asks, and it is not a natural part of the design process. In order to be able to turn accessibility into a core value, we need to change how we see disability, because we usually see disability from the medical model that focuses on the health status of the person and how that person should change to fit the environment. But once you start to see disability from a broader spectrum, which is the social model of defining it, where a disability is a mismatch between environment and abilities, gender, age, and so on, we actually expand the spectrum of disability, and we can see that each of us can have temporary, situational, or permanent disabilities. So disability starts to become part of all our lives. And even though intersections with gender, age, disability, culture, and caregiving amplify exclusion, and poorly designed cities generate disabilities, they limit movement, they limit independence, and they generate disabilities where there are no documents saying that you have a permanent disability, we still see accessibility, as I said, as a special case. So instead of retrofitting, we need to turn accessibility into a natural part of urban planning and design and into a core value. So how do we do this? How do we go from barriers to solutions? The first ideas that you could inspire from and use them, these are actually tools, are related to checking biases and data fairness. AI Fairness 360 is an open source toolkit that helps detect and mitigate bias in data sets, like data collection that I said earlier related to mobility. And we also have this dictionary, buildingwithoutbiases.co.uk, which is very interesting. It's only in English, and it shows architectural language and how biased it is. What's interesting about it, and now I'm showing a print screen on the screen from the app, is that it's only binary. It's a bell curve that fluctuates from left. On the left, you have he, and on the right, you have she. And it goes further left, right, depending on how biased a word is to gender. And I also put non-binary, and the word non-binary says is not in the gender unit dictionary. Sorry. Then we also have activities like the empathy retreat that can help people, like public administrations, to start to prioritize accessibility. This is one of the most complex empathy exercise that we've done until now. It's a camp, a 5 days camp, 3 days activities, first and last day arriving and leaving, where very diverse people come together to try to see disability from another perspective and to prioritize accessibility. Architects, urban planners, public administration, expert citizens, activists, all from very diverse groups, like of diverse ages. The youngest was 3 years old, the oldest was 70 years old, with visual, locomotory, hearing disabilities from the queer spectrum. And on the first day, they share their stories, and this is how you do the cohesion of the group, and they start to find common grounds in exclusion. The second day is called experience, and they go in teams on the same routes through a city, and they actually experience the obstacles that they have discussed the day before when they found common grounds in exclusion. And the third day is the one when you first talk about theory, about what is accessibility, what is retrofitting, what is inclusive design, because this is when people are ready to give up their biases and really listen to why these topics are important. Then another example about tech and public safety is Safety Pin, an app that was developed in India and is used in India that is dedicated to enhance public safety and inclusion, particularly for women. People can do safety audits with predefined parameters such as lighting, walking paths, and public transport. And you can also add nighttime photographs. We've also added here on the list as useful the safer city maps. This app is not active anymore, but I put it as a good practice example because it has something very interesting. It's an add-on to an already viral app, which is Google Maps. And this is something that lowers the cost for public administrations, for instance, to do this data collection. And it's also easier for the participants because people are starting to be fearful of new apps to install on their phones that just dust off there. So it's really helpful to use existing apps that people already use and collect data. Then public space safety, again, a really good study. I mentioned it earlier, queering public spaces from AUP, which gathers a lot of information about the experiences of LGBTQIA community in public spaces, but it also offers concrete solutions of what people could do to enhance the experience for LGBTQIA communities in public spaces, which many of them are related to preserving queer cultural landmarks and making them more visible and more present in public space. But it also focuses a lot on safety and this fear of being harassed, of being seen and being able to see what's around you. When it comes to transport and participation, we have the example of CU app, which is an app, it's used only in Bucharest right now, and it's an app that facilitates connection between visually impaired users seeking assistance to reach specific locations and guides that are willing to help them. And this is because the built environment is not friendly. And unfortunately, this happens we will hear it really soon, I hope, from Irina, from her experience. You will see that this is not solved in many places. So an extra thing is that beneficiaries can also select gender preferences, and they can also share the live location. When it comes to transport and safety, in Paris, there is a really good initiative, which is just related to changing the way buses stop on demand, a line on Paris bus routes after 10 p.m., which actually helps passenger request to be dropped off at a specific location, because this enhances safety, especially in poorly lit areas. And this initiative aims to support women and vulnerable individuals, offering more flexibility than being just stuck with the few bus stations that you have. And when it comes to networks and resources, one really good example is the FEMACT Cities network from URBACT, which is trying to enhance gender equality in urban settings, and they focus on developing integrated action plans to promote gender equality across various public policies, including education, urban planning, health, and economic development. And what is really cool about FEMACT is that they also give you resources, and they published a new report on the experience of Poland, and why this report is really cool and really useful for cities or countries or administrations that are at the beginning in the process of creating policies for gender equality, is that Poland was also at the beginning. So it's a really good case study to see what they tried, what worked, what not, and which were the conclusions that they reached. They were, again, focusing on limited safe leisure spaces, inadequate lighting, insufficient wayfinding system, obstructive physical configurations like physical obstacles in public spaces. Another network which is really helpful, it's Women Mobilize Women. The website is just womenmobilize.org, and it's a global network empowering women in transport to create gender equal mobility systems. And they are focusing on raising awareness about gender and transport, especially in emerging economies. They also offer trainings like Introduction to Gender and Mobility in Emerging Economies course. So womenmobilize.org. When it comes to networks and resources, we also have Gendered Landscape, which is also an URBACT network. They also explore gender-based inequalities in urban landscape. And there's also the information on URBACT, but they have a dedicated website with resources, which is genderlandscape.umea.se, and you can select English in case you do not know Swedish. And one really good example of result from this network is the UMEA's Station of Being, which is a bus station that was developed through co-participation with the community. And the bus stop caters to passengers' preferences, such as standing or leaning while waiting in cold conditions. And it features rotating pods made from locally sourced wood that adjust to shield passengers from wind. And I have an image here on the screen. You can see a bus coming to the bus station, and you have 4 big pillars that hold the roof. And inside you have like this cocoon, I don't know how to describe them exactly, like some tubes, wooden tubes, where people can lean or they can sit, or they protect them from wind. And also everything is very open, so it offers visibility and very good lighting. Another very important topic and good source of information is this initiative called Stalled, because, as I said, public restrooms, as Juana mentioned as well, is existence of public restrooms can say if somebody is an active member of community or not, because it can offer you a wider range of walking or going throughout the city, or it can say that you are not going out of the house because you don't have the facility. So Stalled is redesigning public restrooms for equity, and they are proposing open multi-user gender-neutral restrooms that ensure safety, privacy, and accessibility for diverse users, including transgender and non-binary individuals, caregivers, and people with disabilities. And I have an axonometry with the proposal, one of them. And what they are doing is they are actually proposing to not have separate rooms for restrooms. I mean, there is a hallway that communicates with the outdoor or the main hallway of the building, if it's a public space that's inside, and just have separate stalls in various dimensions that can be used by caregivers, people with motor disabilities, and so on. Because having this visibility and being able to be heard reduces the sense of danger, but also the possibility of being harassed in public bathrooms. Then also changing places, which is a good example of another type of restrooms, accessible restrooms that are for changing adults, because sometimes when you age, you can have urinary incontinency, or you can have some types of permanent disabilities so adults also need to be present and need to be changed in public spaces. So it's important to offer such spaces. There is an image, the bathroom is much bigger than the disability adapted bathroom usually is. And it also offers showers and a hoist that helps the person move from the bed to the shower or to the toilet. Another good example is Trikala Cultural Center that offers dedicated breastfeeding in Greece. It offers dedicated breastfeeding and baby care spaces in their community center. And the last one, Make Space for Girls, which is a really good platform that offers a lot of information about infrastructure like public spaces, parks, and how you could design them for teenagers, women, female teenagers or young women, and how they can be involved in all the process. And you can see projects from concept to implementation and their results afterwards. So it's a really good inspiration. And now the most important part, and sorry for the delay, another solution is to also make a lot of space for real stories. So now I will invite Irina, Tony, and Juana, if they would like to share a bit with us about their experiences. I've stopped sharing my screen. Hello, Irina, Tony, Juana.
Hello, Iris, and thank you for having me.
Hello.
My first question would be if you could please introduce yourselves, like name, occupation, city, town.
Okay, then I will start. I'm Irina. I'm a legally blind woman. I use the pronouns she, her. I am originally from Romania, and now I work in Oslo in IT.
Thank you, Irina.
And I can continue. Hi, my name is Tony. I use they them pronouns. I work as a trainer and as an educator. Yeah, I have short light brown hair, wear glasses, and always green or blue clothes.
Thank you for sharing. And Juana?
Hi, I am Juana. I am an architect and I also teach at Yonminku University of Architecture at the Technical Sciences Department. And I also work at two NGOs regarding built environment and built environment education. I'm recently a mom, and as I said, this changed my whole perspective in relation to the city and mobility. I have dark hair, I also wear glasses, and I am pretty tall.
You. Would you like to share maybe in another in the reverse order, if you ever felt any obstacles or exclusion regarding urban mobility and public facilities? Maybe Juana, if you want to start.
Yes, but it links a lot to the video because lately I felt a lot of exclusion when I go out with the stroller. Because of the lack of toilets infrastructure, because of how difficult it is to get in or out of a bus or of a tram, of how hard it is to connect the subway when you have to use the elevator to get on the platform, and some connection points in Bucharest, if you only have the elevator to go to one platform, and if you have to change stations, you cannot. You can only use the stairs, and you don't have elevators anymore. Then in the first month after Dora was born, first couple of months actually, we got a lot of screenings to do, and we had to go to a lot of clinics and back to the neonatology care for checkups and so on. And then we with such a small baby, we were it was mandatory for us to use the car. As you saw already, there's a lack of parking spaces. We had to plan very well in order to be there on time. At one appointment, we almost missed it because we hit a traffic jam and then we couldn't find parking and so on. So yeah, I find it that my day-to-day universe is way more limited now since I became a mom of a really young child, of a baby.
And Tony, did you
Mm.
ever face any obstacles or exclusion related to public space and facilities?
Obstacles recently because I broke my leg in the beginning of the year, but now I'm able-bodied again and more mobile, but it was definitely a good lesson in how important public transport is and how accessible it needs to be. Otherwise, based on my gender, obstacles in that sense, no. Exclusion, yes. And that comes especially to public bathrooms. I am now lucky to live in Sweden, which has exactly those bathrooms most of the time that you shared, where there's just single bathrooms and they are not gendered. Otherwise, in some places in Sweden, but mainly in other countries, I keep having to go bathrooms where I don't belong. And either I'm lucky and no one noticed, or I get looked at weird, which is uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable anyway. And in a strange way, it's also satisfying because it feels most of the time I'm not recognized for whom I am by especially people who don't know me. So if someone looks at me weird when seeing me in a female bathroom, it's kind of affirming. So yeah, but uncomfortable.
Thank you for sharing this powerful thought. So we now come in a second back to the obstacles because I feel like I would like to ask Tony, how does your gender identity influence safety in public space? Because you mentioned now the perception.
Yeah, I think gender identity is something that's limitedly visible, right? It's not written on my face. I identify. I of course dress a certain way. I have my hair a certain way, but then there's females who look like me. So in that way, if I want to, I can hide, and that's safe because it's safer to be a woman than to be a trans person. And on the other side, every time I meet someone and I want to be seen who I am, I have to out myself. And that always comes with a social risk of not knowing how that person will react. So I think the social component of acceptance and knowledge and fear of other people, also either fear of, oh my God, who is that strange person? Or even just the fear of, oh my God, I don't know how to act around this person because it is unknown and I'm afraid of making a mistake. Is an obstacle in my social relations.
So it's related to attitudes a lot and
Yeah.
people's fear of unknown.
Yeah. And I think in that sense, space, I'm not an architect, so I'm not a specialist in that way, but space can be powerful because what we see and what we have around us is normal, right? Or we perceive it more and more as normal. So I think in the way we build our environments, we can make diversity normal.
Exactly. It would be ideal to be able to go there and turn accessibility into a core priority that emphasizes human diversity. So going deeper into human diversity, Irina, can you also share a bit about your experience related to obstacles in public spaces?
Yes. Yes, I would also like to share also with regards to facilities and the toilet, because it also applies to the blind people. For example, if I want to navigate or if I want to travel a whole day alone, my mitigation would be not to drink water in that day because it's going to be for sure difficult for me to find a toilet. I can definitely ask people around, but I'm not sure exactly for the about the environment where I am in. So I prefer not to drink water or not to go out alone on a long journey because of that. That's on one hand. And on the other hand, when it comes to the obstacles, when I navigate, I use a white cane. And if I know the route and if I can avoid a big road, then I definitely do it. I walk on side roads, which are smaller, and I usually walk directly on the road because it's easier for me to walk straight and just to use the sidewalk or the margin of the sidewalk as a guiding line to walk straight. Because on the sidewalks, usually there are lots of obstacles, from electric scooters to all other things. And definitely, again, it's hard to walk straight.
And you are describing now Oslo experience in Norway, right? Which has also the strategy of 2030 becoming fully accessible. So they are
Yes.
far ahead than Bucharest. So
Yes. The difference between Bucharest or between Romania and Norway, on the side roads, there are no cars parked. So I can really walk free on the road. Of course, it's not safe for me. There are lots of people that try to stop me and to tell me that I'm on the road. But I tell them that I know where I am, and it's on purpose that I walk on the road just to be easier for me. I can definitely walk also on the sidewalk, also on the bigger roads, but then it becomes very exhausting for me. And after, I don't know, 10 minutes or 15 minutes of walking, then I'm exhausting as I would have not even ran because it's a mental exhaustment actually.
would you feel comfortable to also share how you perceive the environment with the webinar?
Yes. So now I can see only light and maybe things with super high contrast if it's the proper light, but usually it's not. I can just see light, and maybe I can be also confused by some lights that are on the street or that, for example, are projected on a sidewalk on in Oslo. This really happens when I want to navigate and I'm not sure if there is a projected light or if there is really an obstacle there. I learned now in front of the library there is just a projected light on the floor, so there's no obstacle there. But in the beginning, I got confused and I tried to avoid that round thing which I saw. But after learning that it's just a light, then I navigate easier.
I wanted to ask this to emphasize the idea of lighting and the importance of it and contrasts of materials, visual contrast, because sometimes many people have a bias related to blind people that they cannot see at all. So I wanted to add that contrast and lighting is also important for visual disabilities. So they don't need
My experience is that most of the people that are visually impaired actually have some sight and they really need high contrast environment.
Thank you, Irina.
Iris, I have also a question for Irina, if I may. There is a question in the chat. Irina, would a different sidewalk design be useful for you? And if yes, what should be prioritized in this design?
To have guiding lines, physical guiding lines, as they usually are, for example, in indoor places, for example, as it is in Oslo and the main train station. But that one would be perfect to have it also on the road, outside, outdoors, as it is, for example, in the pedestrian street in Vienna on Maria Hilferstrasse. There is such a guideline which makes easier to navigate also by blind people, even though it's a very crowded place, but at least you can walk straight.
You are referring to the tactile pavement that it
Yes.
is visual and tactile pavement guiding system.
Yeah.
Coming back to comfort and safety and how we interact with the facilities in urban mobility, do you consider that the needs of caregivers and parents and young children are taken into consideration in design. I'm not just gender and going to a broader spectrum, even for males, when they intersect with caregiving.
Most of the time not. You also gave an example from Greece where there's a mother and child facility that focuses on mothers and their needs for breastfeeding moms. Not all parents are female, not all moms are, I don't know, I don't want to express, not all moms are breastfeeding. Sometimes not all moms can actually be there all the time with their babies for different reasons. Statistically, millennial fathers started to be more and more hands-on and involved in our generation of parents, and they do all the things that societally were known to be done by moms, and they lack spaces. And even you have these mom and child special places where they are carefully designed. Usually in Romania, you only find these kinds of places in hospitals and maternities and some shopping malls and so on, but always private owned. So you don't have them in any public institution. And yeah, they are always for moms. So not for parents, not for caretakers or so on. I think that is not okay. It's good to have them, but it's really, really discriminating. And we used to go in airports, for example. You all the way, also in airports where you have mother and child, and we used to go together with my partner, who is a male, and he was frowned upon by the security at first in the airport. Or maybe at one time I had to go to the toilet as well, and he was changing the baby, and he came out from the mother and child room, but it was an individual, so you couldn't intersect with any other moms, and it wasn't an issue of privacy. And at first the security person at the airport wanted to ask him or to reprobate him until he saw that I came, so the mom was actually there.
So we want to improve these problems that you are telling us about. Tony, I wanted to ask you about public participatory methods and how important is the language in the activities, the language used.
Language is incredibly important. It's for most of us, our main way of communicating, right? And then it makes such a big difference which language we speak. English is fairly inclusive, gender-wise, but there's other languages. So I live in Sweden, but I'm German. Like the German language, that are not inclusive at all, where there's a huge debate in Germany already to only include female versions into language, and then there is a whole cultural debate about which sign to insert because it needs to be ugly and maybe it doesn't sound nice anymore. But for me, I can't even talk about myself in my mother tongue. It is grammatically not possible because it doesn't exist, and because I would need to adapt every sentence somehow weirdly to invent the form that works for me. Which makes it really hard for others also to talk with me or about me, because if I don't know, how should even anybody else know how to describe me, right? And I think the next issue with it is that if I'm not able to express something in my language, or something is not possible to be expressed, then it's really hard to imagine it. So I see that, and I can take the example of my own parents that have a really hard time even just imagining that I could be something else than a woman, because it doesn't exist in their language. And you talked about biases and categories. So we need them in a way to navigate the world, but it's really dangerous because they limit us and our imagination. Yeah, and language is just a very, very powerful tool in that.
That's true. Thank you, Tony. Irina, I'm taking a question from the audience for you. How about women visually impaired safety? What would make you feel safer?
I would just give you an example of me being a woman and gradually losing my sight because I was not born like that. And in the beginning, I refused to use a white cane because I thought that this takes away my femininity, because I was using high heels at that moment and always dressed up with skirts or dresses. And the trick that I was using to that time, it was always talking at the phone when I went out, so that if I was bumping into something, then people would think, or this was my approach on this, that I don't pay attention, not that I don't see.
And
But
this
now having this cane with me, it's like I really feel that it is a tool. Now I accept it. Now it's a part of my life, and it actually gives me also safety, or in a way, I feel more independent also from the safety point of view, because I don't need to rely on someone. I really can feel it with this cane. When it comes to dark places and thinking that I'm blind, maybe people around me can say, hey, it's dangerous to go there, but I don't really feel that danger. Maybe it's because of me and my personality, and not maybe, for sure, it's me. I cannot talk for all of the blind women.
Of course, this is a really good point to emphasize that none of us here represent categories. We are all individuals, and the answers given here in the discussions do not represent a whole group. Everybody is discussing from their individual perceptions. Some things might be useful, but it's very important not to generalize out of the answers. There is a question here, maybe any one of you have just an idea. Often anti-discrimination strategies are being created and worked or in departments for anti-discrimination, etc., in justice administration. So these guidelines never really leave these areas and therefore don't really end at the people that could implement and realize it. Do you think that it is helpful, or do these agendas need to be created with specific focuses? Example, gender equality in urban planning, transportation, etc. Did any of you ever encounter such act? I mean, did these acts actually end to the user? Did you ever find out about these documents or their measures, or have you ever intersected with these?
My question would be, who is actually creating those measures, and if they really include the end user when they create them.
Good one, yeah. Any other remarks or?
Perhaps, Iris, just there are three more questions that we can take. And also, I mean, if our guests would like also to comment, there is, and this actually relates to what Irina just said about how you involve the end users in the planning process. So we have this question from someone working in a regional authority, in the metropolis actually, and asking how to better integrate the citizens in urban planning when it comes to mobility, gender and mobility. Do you have any advice?
Any of us? This is open to any of us.
Yeah, any of you, yeah.
I would presume that in all of the cities, there are NGOs that represent all those vulnerable groups. So I guess they can find in that way end users.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
also,
This is crucial to co-design the planning process. I do also have I also have two more questions. who are the front runner cities in mobility, in gender inclusive mobility? We've seen already UMEA. I have to say, UMEA, this was just one of the examples in terms of gender and mobility. We had the luck to visit UMEA while they were in this URBACT network of gender landscape, and they have been doing wonderful things in terms of safety in public spaces and mobility. So there are many resources that we can share after the webinar about UMEA in Sweden. But perhaps other people can take the floor and complete.
Not if Irina, Tony, or Juana want to add anything else or ask. If not, I think we can go to the sum up.
Yeah, it can maybe just add from what Oana said, that yes, talk to the NGOs. No, sorry, Jenny said that. Talk to the NGOs and the users and educate yourself, because it would be a pity if, the one that are already discriminated against and are being included have to carry all the work to make themselves being included, because this should be this should be on the shoulders of the ones who are in power. So a call to everybody to learn something about part of the intersectionality cake that you don't know about yet.
And I think we need more events where people, as I said, space where people can share their stories. We have a lot of expert talks, but very few real life stories. This is how I feel, at least even from the NGO perspective, that stories are missing from the conversation, like real life experiences. I feel they are not enough, and we don't hear about them often enough. There in Copenhagen, there is this concept of human library. They have events only on Sundays, and you can also partner with them if you want to take the concept to other cities. But I really think we need more spaces where people can become visible and we can learn about each other.
Absolutely. Tony, you want to come in?
Just before you close, I really have to go. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the initiative, and see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you for joining us. And before anybody else goes away, I just have a few things to say. So I have just three polls for you to respond to about the usefulness of the webinar. And also, if you want to receive information about next webinars of this kind, just subscribe to our newsletter or send us a message if you need extra info at communication@urbact.eu. We are going also to share the slides and the recordings, but before you go, I'm going to launch now the polls. So the first one.
Sum up before the poll, just a short sum up about this.
Just before, because I can see that there are many people leaving. So just I will show the polls, and then we have a sum up about what we just discussed. All right. So you should now see on your screen, I have just, for Irina, I have just shared a question that asks about, has this webinar increased your knowledge on gender inclusive mobility? Yes or no? So please do a vote. So that we know, and also we take your feedback into account for the next webinars we will organize. I'm waiting a few more seconds. A bit more. I only have 63 voted, so we are 98 now. So if we can, I'm waiting a few more minutes for you to check your screens and respond. All right, so we have 90% of the respondents who say that your knowledge has increased following this webinar. Thank you very much. I'm going now to go to the next question. Right. I'm not sure you're seeing it yet. All right, so I'm going to launch the second one. So the second question is, what has been more useful for you? And the empathy exercise we did at the beginning with the architect, the mayor, the couple, the theoretical part of this webinar, good practices that Iris shared, and the personal stories from our guests, Tony, Oana, Irina. And you can choose many of them if you want. This is a multiple choice. All right, I'm waiting a few seconds for more respondents. All right, I'm going to stop the poll now and I'm going to share the results for you to see. So this is also something useful for us to take into consideration for the next webinars. So very much appreciated the personal stories. Thank you very much. The good practices too. And the final question is, so the final question is, what should be the focus of the next webinars on gender cities? So if we are going to organize other webinars, if you thought this has been useful, what should the focus be for the next webinar? Should it be again on gender and mobility? So we go on with more good examples. Should it be more something around gender and public infrastructure and public spaces in general? Something about public procurement and how to integrate in public procurement gender clauses. Something around violences against women and other groups, all the above, or something else. And if you have something else that you'd like to propose, you can also put it in the questions and answers section. All right, I'm going to stop now the poll and I'm going to show you the results. So now you should see the results that we have. Like most of you say that you would like to have a webinar on gender and public infrastructure and public spaces, generally speaking, public procurement too, and again on gender and mobility. All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over again to you, Iris, for the final word.
Yes, can you see my presentation?
I'm going now, not yet. I'm going to just stop sharing. Yes, we can see it, yes.
Okay, so just to sum it up, the next steps that can be done by any one of us here, if you are willing to start doing this. First of all, the most important one, challenge your own biases, reflect on how your own experiences shape your perspective on mobility, question whether current transport systems work equally for all groups. The second very important step is to engage in empathy exercises, put yourself in the shoes of a caregiver, but always when you want to simulate something, always have also lived experience, because sometimes when you just simulate, for instance, disability, but there are no people with that type of disability there, biases can be increased. So you always need to have diversity when it comes to empathy exercises. And involve diverse people and perspectives, ensure urban mobility solutions reflect real-life needs beyond dominant perspectives. Actually try to create a group around you that can offer you diversity in age, gender, culture, and so on. And the most important part, develop and test solutions together after all these phases of biases and empathy and creating the diverse group, develop and test solutions together to try to see what works, what not, and always be open to improve, because 100% inclusive does not exist right now in architecture. What we can do is to always be open to try to understand which are the obstacles that maybe we weren't aware of and see how we can improve them with the people that feel them the most. And why we need to do this and why do we need to turn accessibility into a core priority? Because whichever category you think you are right now, your bodies and your needs will change throughout your lives. And this topic includes you, and it includes all of us. So thank you so much. And if you want more information from me, you can also find me on irispopescu.com. And thank you for the guests, Irina, Oana, and Jenny for organizing, and also Camila.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to you, Iris, to our guests, Oana, Irina, and Tony. Thank you to the participants, and we will share all the slides and the recording, and we will keep in touch for the next webinars. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.